Sung, Director of EH&S Technology. We're going to be going over preparing for reporting under Subpart W for oil and gas facilities. Just a quick housekeeping item. We have quite a few people on the call today, so unfortunately I don't think that we will really be able to see questions as they may arise in the webinar. However, if you have a question you would like us to answer, I ask that you please send that question to Naomi Lee. You'll notice she's right towards the top of your participants, if you can see that. And if you have a hard time seeing that, you can also send me the message, and I will certainly do my best to get back with you today with any answers. We have quite a few folks on the call today, so we're also going to have a wide range of experience represented in the call. So we're going to do our best to cover the major points for as relevantly as we can. And just know that if we gloss over something that you would like more information on, more technical detail on, by all means, reach out to us directly after the webinar, because we have lots of information that we certainly share with you, but didn't want to go into all those technical details for all the sources, because we might just be here all day if we did that. So, with that, we will begin our presentation. So our agenda for today is we're going to do just a brief introduction about Trinity Consultants. We're going to do a quick overview of the Subpart W covered sources. Then we're going to review the currently available emission calculation tools. We're going to be focusing on EPA's Subpart W emission calculation spreadsheet and API SANGEA. And then we will go over some of the basic logistics and some of what we see coming in terms of actually getting ready and reporting through e-GRRT for 2012. Now, a little bit about Trinity Consultants. Many of you may know us, but we are an air quality consulting firm. We were founded in 1974 in Dallas, Texas. We have over 300 employees all across the United States, plus China and Bahrain. We focus mainly on regulatory compliance and environmental management solutions specific to air quality issues. Air is a very, very big core part of what we do, and that's what we focus a lot of our efforts on. And here is a map of our U.S. office locations. You can see we've got locations all throughout the United States and certainly throughout most oil and gas producing areas. Some of the services and products that Trinity offers, we focus a large portion of our work on environmental consulting. We do offer EH&S auditing services. We develop environmental software and provide professional training and EH&S staffing services. Now, my name is Georgette Reeves. I am based out of the Albuquerque, New Mexico office. Dr. Sung is based out of our Dallas headquarters. And both of us have been working almost ever since the rule was even just proposed on assisting folks with complying and reporting under Subpart W and doing the emission calculations. So I can assure you we've got a good broad range of experience between the two of us on this rule, so we should be able to answer most any questions you may have. Now, real quickly, I wanted to just do an overview of some of the critical deadlines that we have coming up. Now, the first one's a little bit of a non sequitur, and it's also passed, but it's an important deadline nonetheless. I thought I'd mention it, and that is for folks who had facilities that triggered Title V because of GHG emissions. You had until July 1st to get those applications into your permitting authority, so hopefully you got those taken care of. Now, the next big deadline for Subpart W reporting is going to be July 30th. This is when the Certificate of Registration, or the COR, is going to be due within e-GRRT, and that's the electronic greenhouse gas reporting tool, which we'll be talking about in much more detail as we keep moving through the presentation. Of course, September 28th, 2012 is when the first greenhouse gas reports are going to be due, and if we don't have enough fun on September 28th, we get to do it all over again in March for next year. I'm going to go over briefly the Subpart W covered sources by industry. Now again, we're going to kind of fly through this, so if you have any questions, by all means, reach out to me after the webinar. I'll be happy to discuss any of the details with you. Now, some of the major highlights, as you guys likely know, is that Boosting and gathering stations, as long as they no longer trigger the definition of natural gas processing, are generally out of Subpart W. Basin-wide aggregation for production sources does still remain. Production needs to include all temporary, leased, and portable equipment, regardless of the amount of time that it's on the site. And as many of you know, there was a best available monitoring methods, BAM, allowed for most of the source types. Now here are the Subpart W industry segments covered by the rule. We have offshore production, onshore production, onshore natural gas processing plants, which was by and large the most vague portion of the industry defined in the rule. We have natural gas transmission, underground natural gas storage, LNG storage and import-export, and natural gas distribution. Here's a graphic that we've used in the past when the rule first kind of came out to try and break out how the rule covers the various sources under Subpart W. You'll see that obviously onshore production is covered at the wellhead. You had some gas gathering and boosting stations that could have potentially triggered Subpart W reporting if they met the previously vague definition of gas processing, which fortunately the EPA has now clarified. Obviously, we then highlighted here natural gas processing and storage, as well as transmission, compression, and on down to distribution. So offshore petroleum and natural gas production. There's a 2011 GOATS inventory effort, and sources that are already reporting GOATS will use the GOATS study year data. Sources that are not already required to report in GOATS will use GOATS methodologies. And there's a minimum 4-year reporting cycle, even if GOATS reporting is less frequent, and you use Subpart C to calculate combustion emissions. Now for onshore petroleum and natural gas production. Again, onshore natural gas and petroleum production will need to include all portable combustion equipment as well as contracted and leased equipment, including drill rigs and workover rigs. And there are a total of 17 listed source types that need to be reported under Subpart W. And we've kind of broken them out a little bit. The first group that you see here on this slide are the reporting sources that need to be grouped by Sub-basin Category or by field, depending on how you categorized your sources for this year. These are the listed source types that you need to group by your facility. Now again, for onshore natural gas production, your facility, whenever we use the word facility, we're talking about the entire basin in which you operate. And the sources listed on this slide are going to be the source types that actually are listed by individual source. In some segments, you'll actually be responsible for reporting a unique ID number for some of these sources. Now, on to onshore natural gas processing. Onshore natural gas processing, one of the interesting little facts here is that this segment does include residue gas compression equipment owned or operated by the natural gas processing facility downstream of the gas processing plant. If you have compression downstream of your gas processing plant before it reaches a transmission compression station that you own and operate, that needs to be included as part of your facility emissions for that gas processing facility. Again, the source category generally doesn't include emissions from gas gathering and boosting stations as long as they don't trigger the definition of gas processing, which the EPA has clarified to include forced extraction of liquids from natural gas. This was a good thing because the original definition was a bit vague, and it made it look like if you had something like an inlet separator or a knockout pot, just by the act of passive water removal, you could potentially trigger the gas processing definition. Fortunately, in the December 23rd amendments, the EPA clarified that. So hopefully, as long as you don't have any other kind of treatment going on at those gas boosting stations, they should be exempt from reporting, at least under Subpart W, as long as the combustion emissions don't trigger Subpart C. These are the listed source types. Now for onshore natural gas transmission compression. What we've included included here, and I apologize because this really does make for some seriously ugly slides, and unfortunately I have quite a few of them. But what we have here is literally copy and pasted word for word from the regulation, and that is the definition of natural gas transmission compression. Sometimes you've just got to go with what the rule says exactly word for word. I have not stumbled across a lot of facilities who have accidentally found themselves in this segment, so hopefully you're clear whether or not you are triggering the natural gas transmission compression definition under this rule. And these are the listed source types for natural gas transmission compression. Underground natural gas storage. And again, copied and pasted directly from the rule the definition of this source category. I'll leave this up for just a few seconds so you can read it, make sure that you might not accidentally trigger this. And the listed source types for underground natural gas storage are listed here. Again, fairly straightforward. LNG storage and LNG import-export. These are the required source types for this industry segment. And lastly, natural gas distribution. The listed source types and natural gas distribution, along with onshore production, also had a modification to the definition of facility. These are the equipment, the listed source types for equipment leaks that are covered. We have some more equipment leaks on these listed source types, and then stationary combustion using Subpart W to calculate those emissions. So now that we've kind of gone through that very, very quickly, we're now going to move forward into the EPA's Subpart W emission calculation options. So there's lots of ways in which you can calculate emissions, but the ones we're going to cover today is we're going to review the EPA Subpart W calculation spreadsheet, which was released on, I believe, June 6th of this year. We're also going to be reviewing American Petroleum Institute's, or API's, SANGEA 4.0. Some folks may be familiar with SANGEA. It was a program that's been used by API by using API's Compendium 2009 factors to calculate emissions. And what API has done is they're working to modify and have modified SANGEA to include a Subpart W calculation module. Now, a third option, which we're really not going to cover here today, is that some of you may have or may be considering an Environmental Management Information System, or an EMIS, to manage your greenhouse gas calculations. There's lots of options out there, and again, I'd be happy to talk to anyone who has any questions. So would Dr. Sung, but we're not going to really cover that today. We're going to really focus on these two options, the EPA calculation spreadsheet and SANGEA, both of which are free of charge. Now, we've been reviewing EPA's calculation spreadsheet, and Sue and her team has been doing a lot of work in testing the accuracy of that spreadsheet. So I'm going to be providing a high-level review of this spreadsheet's functionality. Now, the way this spreadsheet is designed to calculate emissions, it is one spreadsheet file for one reporting facility. Now, again, for a lot of you, that's going to be a standard street address. For a fair number of you, that's going to be an entire basin or an entire LDC system. You can use this spreadsheet to calculate emissions from each of the source types. The calculation sheet does tend to track, by and large, pretty accurately with the rule. And the final calculated results can be what appears to be easily copied and pasted into EPA's integrated reporting form, which we'll also talk about. Now, this calculation spreadsheet is currently in draft form. We don't have an exact date on when the EPA may finalize it, but I will say this, it does seem to incorporate the proposed May changes to emission factors. Now, from a calculations standpoint, that's not that big of a deal. It's fairly easy to update emission factors in calculation tools. But from a functionality standpoint, this could be a big deal because there were some rather sizable, what appear to be errors in EPA's emission factors, especially for onshore natural gas production, that was surprising, that was finalized in the December 23rd amendments. Now, I apologize if this is hard to read, but what we have here is a screenshot of this Subpart W calculation tool. You can see in the box there that you select the industry segment under which you're reporting. And based on your selection, it will then propagate throughout all the tabs in the spreadsheet, all the fields that you theoretically should be entering data in for that particular industry segment. And you'll see the red circle there at the bottom. I've circled. You can see all the tabs there, how you would go through and address each one of those 17, for example, emission source categories for production, or it would be 5 or 6 for processing, etc. Now, as I mentioned, Dr. Sung's team has been working very, very hard. A lot of us have been working real hard to really dig into this tool, see how it's working, check the accuracy, check that it's tracking with the regulation, and we've been working real hard on that. We have identified some issues, which we've reported to the electronic greenhouse gas reporting tool help desk as bugs or requests for clarifications. And we have found some bigger picture kind of problems. We're not sure exactly how the tool will act when you're dealing with a large number of emission sources. And for some source types, we're finding that maybe not all calculation scenarios are going to be included. Now, for pneumatic devices, now again, for anyone who really wants much more technical detail on what we found, we'll be happy to go over it. But for now, for purposes of this presentation and this webinar, I wanted to just give you an idea of what general calculations you may want to keep an eye on if you're using them for your own purposes. So we've found some problems in the pneumatic devices calculation. We found some inconsistencies in the well venting for liquids unloading calculation. We found what could potentially be a limitation on completions and workovers with hydraulic fracturing, in that the tool seems to allow you to only select one method for each sub-basin and well type combination. This may, from a practicality standpoint, this may not really impact the user, because it does seem that a lot of folks who are subject to this completions and workovers with hydraulic fracturing are either doing all direct measurement or just using the well dimensions and pressures to calculate. I haven't come across a lot of folks who are combining those methods, but it's possible you might. We did find some problems with the centrifugal compressors calculations. We found some inconsistencies on the equipment leaks for onshore production, and we did find that for some reason on combustion it's not recording the total fuel usage, even though that is required under 98.236 in Subpart W. Now with that, I would like to hand this over to Sue Sung, who's going to discuss SANGEA 4.0 and the changes to SANGEA, and also walk us through a demonstration of some of the basic functionality of SANGEA that you may find useful when preparing for Subpart W reporting. Sue?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Trinity's webinar. And I'm Sue Sung with Trinity Consultants. I'm located in Dallas, Texas, our corporate office. We have been working with the API since late 2010, and beginning at 2011 to redevelop API SANGEA software. Some of you may have used the previous version of SANGEA. It's a spreadsheet function software, and the API recognized the software has been obsolete. Georgette, can you pass the presenter to me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, here we go, Sue. your desktop.
Very good. So we'll go through just a few slides, kind of give everybody a quick background introduction about SANGEA 4.0. SANGEA 4.0, as everybody knows, SANGEA is a copyright-owned, trademark-owned by API, and they have been supporting SANGEA ever since they received the software from Chevron, donated software originally to API. And API has maintained their position to distribute the software free of charge to promote the standardization of reporting greenhouse gas emissions, not just in U.S. but globally. And this SANGEA 4.0 is a complete overhaul from the previous spreadsheet version. And this new version is built in the latest Microsoft technology on the .NET framework, and using the Access database as the back-end storage function to store all your source data information. And then we also use Microsoft reporting service to generate reports. In terms of the scope of the SANGEA software, SANGEA 3.04 was the latest version, the previous version, and available up until probably last month was available via API's website. And this software is designed to allow a corporation entity to report greenhouse emissions for multiple locations. So in the definition of location here, if we apply it into Subpart W, it's basically a facility who the facility will submit their greenhouse gas emissions to EPA. And so you don't have to create many of the separated source files for each location if it's under SANGEA. And it's designed to assist the oil and gas companies to managing and estimating and also reporting greenhouse gas emissions through various different ways. And also the system helps to track the energy consumption, and also as requested by the committee of the API, SANGEA development team, and we retain the criteria pollutant emissions based on EPA's AP42 factors to calculate criteria pollutant emissions as well. A quick overview of SANGEA and reporting hierarchy. And the entity is the reporting company, and then under the entity, the company, and you can create multiple locations. The locations, we group it, the company's location, and based on, you can either, this is totally up to the user to decide, you can either group it as a business segment, or you can group it geographically based on location. So for Subpart W purpose, you can group your onshore production as one location group, and then you can group all the gas processing and so far so on. If you have an onshore production under facility or under one onshore production facility, you can identify sub-basins as well. Then for each site, for each reporting location, which is your facility, and that facility you can report fuel. You can start creating your local fuel usage and fuel type and your local source type. Just a really very high-level architectural view of SANGEA. SANGEA allow user to, once you create a location, which is your reporting site, and you need to set up the fuel usage for that site, and the fuel property and emission factor is stored into the fuel section. And then you can set up the sources. And if any of you have previous experience with the SANGEA 3, and SANGEA is breaking source type into module 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 11 source modules under EPA MRR. There's 15 source module under API Compendium 2009. So we have to merge two of them into one. Then you have the activity, which is each year you have to update, some of your fuel usage data, your source, single source like usage, fuel usage as well, and also this fuel is actually the fuel sampling data. If you have to sample your own fuel, and the single source type is for combustion, flare, acid gas recovery, and these kind of sources. You need to update your source parameters each year, the usage day, operation day, those information. And multiple source is for sources like multiple wells into one source group, and also non-routine event, and also you can enter emissions directly into the system if you use a system like glycal, GRI glycal, and amycal to determine your greenhouse gas calculation, and those calculated results can be entered directly into SANGEA. And through these calculations and the reports generated by SANGEA is in a Excel spreadsheet format to help users to import large amount of existing sources from your existing spreadsheet tool. And we also create several import-export tools to allow user to load in large amount of sources. This is just a quick overview of different type of sources included in SANGEA and SANGEA 4. And for API Compendium 2009, pretty much completely incorporated into SANGEA 4. And you can see all these items covered in various source modules. For US EPA MRR subpart, under the agreement with API, and we have incorporated Subpart C, and the Subpart P is for hydrogen plants, and the Subpart W, that's all the Subpart W sources completely incorporated into SANGEA 4. And Subpart Y for refinery is incorporated into SANGEA as well. We have created several user-friendly features. I'm not going to go through the details today, and we have scheduled a specifically just 1 hour SANGEA 4.0 introduction webinar on later this month, and we will announce it and through a separate announcement. So just quickly today, and give you a high-level review of SANGEA. Using SANGEA 4.0 for the Subpart W reporting, you can do a source-by-source. When we prepare for SANGEA, as Georgianne mentioned earlier, my team has done real thorough detail review of SANGEA calculation spreadsheet tool and also reporting tool. It's because we want to make the time EPA finalizes their release, SANGEA 4.0 will have the consistent calculation results and also reporting data field as EPA required. Including the SANGEA software also including both Subpart C and Subpart W sources. For those of you and are covered, your site includes both Subpart C and Subpart W. In your calculation, you need to review you need to create your sources into separate calculation tools. No limits on number of sources. By looking at EPA's calculation tool, they did include about up to 400 lines of sources for individual wells, for some of these reporting wells. And for majority of companies, and the EPA's calculation tool seems like have enough line of Excel spreadsheet rows available for entering the sources. But some of you may be exceeding the limit. I do not know. I assume those companies may be the lines that have submitted their own comments to EPA individually. For each reporting year, reporting facility and it can be managed under just one project file and under SANGEA 4.0. So you can consolidate all your source data information under SANGEA 4.0. If you use EPA's calculation tool, as Georgia mentioned earlier, every reporting site will require to create one spreadsheet. So you needed to have a very good control of the number of sources control of number of files you need to create. We also allow a user to put in edits and comments into each edit, so create an audit trail for the files you've been using. Here is the website. You can request a free license of SANGEA, and right now I will just give everybody a really quick overview of SANGEA, and so you can see for those of you have used the SANGEA Excel spreadsheets in the past, you probably know you remember SANGEA was SANGEA 3. SANGEA 3 software is in Excel, and the new SANGEA is totally newly revamped and designed now. And so you can start with, this is a standard Microsoft application with enclosed as a software. If I needed to make a similar analogy of the current SANGEA, its design concept is similar as the Tank 4.01 if you have used the Tank to do your emission calculation. So the software is encompassed with all the calculations, equations is built into the system. And so you only need to follow through the process and bring you the wizard how to do the calculation. And just quickly, and when you start with the SANGEA, you can create a new file. When you create a new file, we require companies to choose if you want to include criteria pollutants or you don't need to include criteria pollutants. And also, a very important issue about EPA's reporting requirement, Subpart W currently is still, everything is based on 68 Fahrenheit, and Subpart C is based on 60 Fahrenheit. And in SANGEA, we standardize one temperature, so you don't have to convert your usage and into different degree temperature. So once you set it up, the company you set it up will give you the basic information, and you will enter your company name. And also for for those of you on international and other protocol, you may choose changing your global warming potential. But in SANGEA, we keep US EPA global warming potential as default. Right now, just quickly go through things. So let me load in an example. For this example site, and we have created a very quick ABC company. That's a gas processing site, and if you are a onshore production, you can actually create onshore production sub-basin in SANGEA tool. And for this example, we just create a gas processing site as a quick example for today. And for fuel usage, you can create, you have a natural gas fuel, or you can have a local field gas, and or actually you can use the local specific fuel. And for source, you can see you can have all the gas processing site with fugitive sources and oil and gas sources, flare, and these various type of sources. And then you can store, save all the information and created and saved under this can be reused in the next year when you load in the new activity information, which is entered in the following tab. Give you a quick example for the ABC site, and we have a compressor engine, and you can see you can enter the fuel usage for the annual total, and we'll enter the fuel usage. For those of you do track your fuel usage by monthly for your criteria bulletin or for other protocol, you can put in your monthly data here as well. Today, due to the limited of the time, and so I will not go through any more detail, and just want to kind of give you a glance of what SANGEA 4.0 would look like. And now, I'm going to pass the presenter right back to my co-presenter.
Thank you so much, Sue. So again, this is the website where you can go to request a copy of SANGEA. And of course, if you have more detailed questions on the program itself, Sue is a great resource, best resource I can think of, and we'll have our contact information on the final slide of this presentation. Now, we've gone through how some calculation options that you have available to you. Our next step is going to be preparing to actually submit the report to EPA through the e-GRRT, or EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reporting tool. Again, we're going to do an overview of e-GRRT and review some of the reporting tools that have been released and are available to us at this time. So, an overview of e-GRRT. This is a quick screenshot, but it's a web-based system. It is intended, and this is EPA's phrasing, to leverage new technologies for easier reporting and analysis. It certainly does make for EPA, to easily analyze our data, but reporting can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. Now, again, I realize we have folks on the call who are going to have a wide range of experience with e-GRRT, so I'm going to kind of go through this step by step. For first-time users, getting set up in e-GRRT is going to be a several-step process. If you've never used e-GRRT before, you need to request an electronic signature agreement, or an ESA. This ESA is a physical document which you download, you fill out, and you have to send to McLean, Virginia for the e-GRRT help desk to approve before you can do anything else in e-GRRT. I'm bringing this up now because if you have not done this step to get the ESA, today is the day to do it because we have found that they've by and large been relatively fast at approving these ESAs, these electronic service agreements. But I fear as we get closer to the September 28th deadline, they may start to get backlogged and they may slow down a little bit. So if you have not yet done this, if you've never been into e-GRRT, if you don't have a login, please do be sure to go through the process to get the ESA into the system. Now, once you have the ESA, and keep in mind that anyone who wants to be an e-GRRT, so your designated representative or your AD or your alternate designated representative, will also need to go through this process of going through the electronic signature agreement. Now, once that has been done, once you've been approved by the e-GRRT help desk, they'll send you a login, and then you can begin the ball rolling on preparing the Certificate of Representation, or the COR. A COR can be prepared by just about anyone, including an agent, and quite frankly, before a designated representative or a DR is identified and approved, this is the stage within e-GRRT when an agent actually has the most kind of power to move things along. But once an ADR or a DR is designated and approved, the permissions for that agent really get clamped down. Now, this COR must be completed by July 30th, 2012. So the Certificate of Representation acts as an official designation of the DR and the ADR, and as I mentioned, once a designated representative has been approved in e-GRRT, they are now the only ones who can approve new designated representatives, new ADRs, or new agents. If you work with a company and the designated representative that you may have already appointed from a previous year reporting, or say you purchase an asset and the designated representative is the person from the previous company, you'll need to contact the help desk directly to make these changes. At least as of a few months ago, it did not appear there was a very seamless way to do this. If you have a designated representative that's no longer with the company, and there's no ADR designated, or the ADR is also no longer with the company, you're going to have a very hard time working within e-GRRT, and you'll have to work directly with the help desk to get that resolved. And obviously, that will take time. Now, one of the things that that is key for reporting, and again, my apologies for the world's worst PowerPoint slide ever, because it's got so many words on it. No one should ever put this in a presentation. But the rule requires folks to, report their ownership. Now, the report must include the legal name and physical address of the highest level United States parent company of the owners or operators of the facility and the percent ownership interest. Now, the third bullet down, I have defined what that means. The United States parent company means the highest level United States company with an ownership interest in the facility or supplier as of December 31st of the year for which data are being reported. Now, I'm going to take a moment here to let that sink in, because that becomes really important, again, especially in the oil and gas industry, where assets do tend to trade hands with some regularity. If you purchased a facility or a bunch of wells or something in July of last year, you're on the hook to report everything that happened since January 1st. This means that for future reporting and future, acquisitions, you may want to consider this whole greenhouse gas reporting rule as part of the due diligence, because you need to make sure that you have that information before they, leave the key under the mat and say best of luck to you, because they may not really be all that motivated to return your calls once the sale has gone through. So keep that in mind for reporting both this year and in future years. Now, of course, ownership for onshore production can be an incredibly complex issue. And yet once again, here we have directly copied and pasted from the rule the definition of an onshore petroleum and natural gas production owner or operator. Now, I'm sure if I were to unmute the line and if we had producers on the call, you could give me 1,000 corner cases as to why this definition is really difficult to deal with, but unfortunately, it is what it is. This is the definition as found in the regulation. It's a person or entity who holds the permit to operate the wells on the drilling permit or an operating permit where no drilling permit is issued, or it's the person or entity that pays the state or federal business income taxes. Now, when you do get all of your ESAs and CORs and all of that good stuff squared away, now we've got to start the task of naming your facilities in e-GRRT. Now, for many of you, that may be a very straightforward task. You know the name of a gas plant, or you know the name of your transmission compression station. But for others, it's not quite as straightforward. And for anyone interested, I do have a link that will take you to the FAQ from EPA that outlines these requirements. So, in order to name your facilities in e-GRRT for offshore production, they want you to use a comma delimited WGS 84 latitude longitude with degrees to 4 places or better. That's going to be per platform. For onshore production, it's going to be the address of the U.S. corporate headquarters and the name, the code, and the name of the basin. So the example that the EPA gives on their website is MLH Production, which is obviously a company name, 470, which is the basin number, and then Fort Worth Syncline is the basin name. For natural gas distribution, you need to report by headquarter address and in the name, the state the LDC operates. And for everyone else, use your conventional street address. Now, some of the overall logistics on e-GRRT, again, for folks who have not really had a chance to get into e-GRRT, July 30th, again, is your deadline for your certificate of representation in e-GRRT. And as I mentioned, since you've got to do this whole physical mailing to McLean, Virginia for approval, this does take time, so definitely consider getting the ball rolling on there. For those of you who may already have been into e-GRRT, say earlier last year for BAM extensions, be prepared if you haven't been back since, your login may have expired. So make sure you've got your security questions handy in case you need that to reset that. And a point that I can't make enough is that e-GRRT requires a very high level of involvement from your designated representative. It's unfortunate because, of course, for a lot of folks, your designated representative is probably the person that's hardest to nail down when you're in the crunch of an emissions inventory and you need them to sign something. But that is an absolute reality that operators are facing, and that is, you know, if you know your designated representative is going to be on vacation the entire month of September, now's a really good time to start identifying who could realistically possibly be the ADR for that period, or consider making sure you have an alternate designated representative if you don't have one identified in the system already. And one last point that I want to make, while I don't want to discourage you from calling consultants if you need help, of course, I must admit that the e-GRRT Help Desk is a really great resource. They really do what they can to try and be helpful. We found that they are generally pretty responsive, and they really do seem to want to help operators comply with this reporting requirement. But I suspect, just like anything else, as we get closer to September 28th, their responsiveness is going to start declining, just because I'm sure they're going to be getting tons of calls. But they really are a really great resource. Now, e-GRRT is not officially yet open for reporting under Subpart W. Some of you may have participated in the sandbox trial period that happened last month. They have not yet released or indicated the comments that they received during that sandbox testing period. And at this point, EPA has only provided a draft XML schema for reporting. And for folks who may not be familiar, XML is a programming language for encoding documents into a machine-readable form. Now, the EPA e-GRRT reporting spreadsheet tool, the integrated reporting form, or as we are going to call it, or have been calling it, the IRF. The integrated reporting form has been released by EPA as basically the only way for Subpart W reporters to report their emissions through e-GRRT. For those of you who were subject to Subpart C, you may have been familiar with the interface that's directly within e-GRRT that you get to use and fill out there. For Subpart W, you need to use this integrated reporting form, which is an Excel spreadsheet. some of the general issues on this IRF, and I'll have a screenshot of this document on the next slide. But it does appear that there might be a limited number of sources that you can actually input into that spreadsheet, and it may not be enough for all sources. This will be something we're going to be, testing, trial and error as we move forward into September ourselves. Now, I will say this, the IRF does not track exactly with the reporting requirements outlined in 98.236. For folks who've been kind of eyeball deep in the regulation, you may know that, there's everything you need to collect in order to calculate emissions, and that's detailed in that paragraphs, A through Z in that rule. But under 98.236, that's what it actually outlines. Here are the reporting requirements under Subpart W. And what we're finding is that IRF is not tracking exactly with those reporting requirements in 98.236. In fact, it seems to be actually a little less burdensome. So I hope that's a good thing. But I also hope they don't give us this IRF and then later come back and say, gee, why didn't you report in accordance with 98.236? Now, the reporting tool, the IRF is currently in draft form, although it does say in some places on the spreadsheet that it's final. The form has some fantastic user instructions within the spreadsheet. And much like what we saw earlier on that earlier screenshot for the calculation tool, it's set up in a very similar fashion in which you identify the reporting industry in which, the industry under which you're reporting, whether you're offshore production, onshore production, processing, etc., and it will then propagate throughout the other tabs the sources you need to fill in. Now, while it does do that, we still recommend going through each and every single tab and each and every single source, even if that source does not apply to you. We have found, and again, folks who may have reported under Subpart C or other subparts last year, we have found that, there are things that may not apply to you, but if you don't put a 0 there, for example, it will get kicked back to you as being an invalid report. So go through each tab very carefully, make sure that everything checks out. And also this validation checks may not be infallible. This is something we've found in reporting in the past. And that is, you can prepare a greenhouse gas report, whether it's directly in e-GRRT or through this form. You can prepare a report, and the validation checks that is performed within e-GRRT come back as being perfect. You have an A+ on your submittal. Wonderful. You get all green check marks, you're happy, you submit your report. 4 months later, EPA comes back and says, you didn't give us the name of your company, because for some reason, the validation check didn't pick that up, that field was left blank. So, even though there are validation checks built into the system, and in some ways some of the validation checks can sometimes hamstring you, we found that as much as they can be difficult, they also can still miss very big things. Now, this is a screenshot of the IRF. You'll see, again, it looks very similar to the calculation spreadsheet. And now it's not exact, and again, these are two very different tools. You've got this calculation spreadsheet and the reporting form. They don't talk to each other, but it does appear that you can copy and paste your calculated values from the calculation tool into this spreadsheet. And you'll see at the bottom, again, I've circled that you can see for each tab, you have sources. Now, just a moment on the importance of a sub-basin category. For those of you in onshore petroleum and natural gas production, you are required to roll up certain emissions on a sub-basin category level. The original rule allowed you to roll those up by a field level. EPA came out and said, we understand we told you that you had to group things by field, and then in December changed it to a sub-basin category. So don't worry. In 2012, you can report your emissions by field if that's how you organized your wells. However, in the reporting form, you still have to select a sub-basin category based on what's defined in the rule. So you have to so even if you've grouped your wells by field, you still have to then try to identify what field is most appropriate to match up with which sub-basin category. And for folks who may not know, sub-basin category is based on the basin in which you operate, the county in which you operate, and one of the 5 formation types, which kind of force you to consider most of your wells generally gas wells. So here's a screenshot of that sub-basin category sheet. And again, if you select that you're in onshore production, it will not do anything. It won't let you go and collect $200 until you select your sub-basin categories. So as you can see here, on the upper left-hand corner, we have the select basin in which applicable sub-basins are located. There's a drop-down menu there. The EPA has pre-populated this spreadsheet with the basins that line up with the Geologic Provinces Code Map put out by the AAPG. I'll also say this, this drop-down list is actually sorted first by basin number, then by name. So if you operate in the Permian Basin, unless you know that it's basin number 430, you're not going to be able to find it in the list under P for Permian. Now once you select that, right below it, the EPA has then pre-populated the counties that exist within that basin. And then once you move over the next field, you need to identify the formation type. So as you can see here, I've selected, rather at random, the Green River Basin, basin number 535. I've selected 2 counties at random, and I just happen to identify both of those as coal seam. Now with this, I'm going to hand this over to Sue to address, because the truth is Sue and her team have been working on this rule for many years, well, I guess as many years as it's been around, so as long as we've been reporting, and she's got some really direct and relevant experience on how you report multiple subparts. Many of us here on the call may have only really reported under Subpart C to date, and come September 28th, we're going to be entering into a new world where we're actually going to have to report under multiple subparts. Obviously, I think the most common is going to be people who are subject to Subpart C and Subpart W. But we also are going to find, especially in the processing segment probably, people who are subject to C, W, Subpart PP, and Subpart UU. So Sue, with that, I'd like you to go over a little bit of the details on the submittal and the potential challenges for multiple subparts.
Okay, there's only 2 slides, so Julia can help me to drive this